Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And for my very dear friend who wrote the foreword to my book, The Tao of Influence, James Twyman, to be here and to be interviewed on the topic of influence and peace and many other things that we're going to be talking about today that are related to the book. And for those of you that don't know, on September 15th, if you're watching before or after, the book launches. And so the Tao of Influence is available on KarenMcGregor.com right now. And then you can go after September 15th to Amazon to pick up a copy. And we have a wonderful, wonderful series of gifts for you, including an author training where you'll learn how to write and publish and sell and market your book and all that good stuff that's included with the purchase of a copy. Now we're going to get started with the good stuff. All right. So, James Twyman, wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
It is so good to be here, and I'm so honored to be able to support you in your book launch, just as I was honored to write the introduction. And I know that this book and everything that you share is going to touch so many thousands of people. So I'm just grateful to be part of that.
Thank you so much, James. And we're with a very, very special person today. I would love to read the formal bio of James. He's been a friend of mine for so long. And in fact, I ran into him in Assisi, Italy.
That's right.
Last year. And that's how James wrote the foreword to my book, because we actually connected back in person after a few years.
Yeah. I was, I think, walking down a street, and you were sitting in a cafe with your son, I believe, and I heard my name called, and there you were.
Well, I saw the guitar, and that's always a sign that it's you.
Yep.
You know? All right. So James Twyman is a New York Times bestselling author of 16 books, including Emissary of Light, The Moses Code, The Barn Dance, and his latest, Giovanni and the Camino of St. Francis. He is known around the world as the Peace Troubadour. In 1994, James put peace prayers from the 12 major religions to music and began traveling the world performing concerts to groups of thousands to spread his message of peace. He is also a producer and director of 8 feature films, including the award-winning Indigo and Redwood Highway, and his latest, Becoming St. Francis, a documentary about his journey across the U.S. performing the one-man musical Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. He's also a professional musician, singer, and songwriter who learned to play the guitar at the age of 12 under the instruction of Father Vince Ferraro, his parish priest. James has since recorded and produced 16 CDs, including I Am Wishes Fulfilled with Dr. Wayne Dyer, bless his heart, and sold over 350,000 copies and was a Billboard chart bestseller. We're also going to be talking about James being consecrated as an anchorite in 2020. This is absolutely fascinating. You have to hear about this.
Just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Welcome, James. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Great to be here.
First, I want to ask you, of course, with the launch of the book and you writing the foreword, I really want to ask for all of our listeners, what is it that you feel is the connection between peace, inner peace and outer peace, and the word influence? How are they connected?
Well, everything is connected. We just have to see the connections, don't we? And outer peace is inner peace, and inner peace is outer peace if we have a whole vision and choose to see things as they really are rather than splintered or separated. It's so easy in our perceptual mind to say, well, that's inner, that's outer, this is me, that's you. Mm-hmm. But the experience, and this is really what we're here for, the experience of the truth of oneness, so many ways of saying it, that's what we're really seeking. And when you come into that experience, all of those limitations, all of those separations begin to dissolve, and you realize there's only one thing going on. And when we come into that experience, that's the greatest influence that there can possibly be. If I'm trying to influence you through my personality or on some mental level, at the very best, I'm just trying to control you and I'm trying to manipulate you. But when I'm just in that space of pure being, it's so seductive that people feel that and they want that, and because they know it deep within themselves, maybe not consciously, maybe it's been pushed to the side, buried, but deep within us is the knowledge and the remembrance of the truth of who we really are. And when we're with someone who has awakened that, who has allowed that to take over their life, that is the greatest influence. We want to be around people like that. And it has nothing to do with talking, does it? We can be around people who talk spiritual stuff all the time, but so often you feel like there's not something connecting. Or you can be with someone who says very little, but when you're with them, your heart's on fire. You feel that connection. That's the real influence. And I love that you chose the title and also the focus of the Tao of influence. I've always been in love with the Tao Te Ching and all of the wisdom, the ancient wisdom that's there. And so for you to be able to bring that all together and to show what true and real influence is, I think is going to be a great gift to the world.
Well, thank you, James. Yeah, I mean, I really love, that we're bringing together the idea that we can change the world, we can have impact, but not to chase it, not to force it, but actually to cultivate it. And like you said, when it's cultivated, it becomes then one. The outer and the inner become one, and people can really be shifted by that. So I love this topic because that's what my steps are in the book, is to really share. Okay, well, that's an amazing concept, and how do we get there, right?
Right.
And so that's one of my questions for you too. Is as I went through the book talking about how to actually get there, what are some ways that you have found, in your many years of working with people, facilitating peace? What would you say, if you could narrow it down? I know this is difficult, but 3, 4, 5 things that you feel are really important in developing and cultivating peace, so that that influence is a natural outcome. It's not something that you chase.
Well, the first thing, and maybe the main thing that I would share, is the word desire. You have
Mm.
to want it. And you want something like that experience we were talking about before, often because you've come to a point where you've tried everything else, nothing else has worked, your back is against the wall, and you realize there has to be another way. And something opens up inside you in that moment. And it's like a seed that's planted. And if you water that seed and it begins to grow, you begin to see little traces of that in the world and in your life. And then that desire begins to grow. And you begin to realize, this is what I really want. This is who I really am. And then you put all of your focus there. The problem with most people is that they don't have the ability to focus on only one thing. They want this one moment, another thing, another moment, and something else, a different moment. Instead of saying there's only one thing that I want, and if I can just focus on that one thing, then everything else is going to come to me easily and naturally. I don't have to chase after anything. I just have to have a strong desire for what? Well, we could put this a lot of ways. We could say for the peace of God. We could say for love, for the experience of unbridled love. We could say my heart's desire, whatever it is that rings true for you, it's going to be the same thing. You could just say God, the experience of oneness with divinity. But the key is to really, really amp up your desire. And the more you want that one thing, you realize that it's the only thing that wants you as well.
Mm.
My wanting it is the reflection of that experience wanting only me. And if I can just keep feeding that fire, it all comes down to just keep putting fuel onto that fire. And as it grows hotter and brighter, it burns away everything that's different from it, everything that you don't really need. And then you're left with the only thing that you do need, which is you, the truth of who you are. So I'm just going to leave it with that, because I think that covers everything right there.
Well, and I actually have a question for you on that, because in the book I talk about the difference between desires and goals, and how desire is actually a very soulful experience, and goals are very heady
Yep, that's
and
right.
get into the ego and can get into, okay, I must have this in order for my identity
Right.
to be to be worthy, to be seen, all of those things. So James, in your experience, how do you learn to make sure that it's desire and not the ego's wanting, which will
Hmm.
never produce true
Yeah.
influence?
That's such a good question. And you use the I word, or identity, and that's kind of the key. My identity, or who I think I am, who I've built myself up to be over the long course of my life, is not who I really am. And yet I use that as a facade, and I build a whole world around that, just to deny the truth of who I am. And so my desire first to break through, that. And a goal, as you said, is just another way of propping up my identity,
Yeah.
because it's about getting. If I could just get this, if I could get that, then I'm going to be stronger than who I think I am. But the key to breaking that pattern, it begins with humility. The ego wants to build you up so that you're this grandiose entity separate from everything else, but your soul does not long for grandiosity, but for grandeur. Grandeur is like the light of heaven shining down upon you. And that's that is so far beyond goals, because then there only becomes one goal, and that's what we were talking about before, the single desire for the truth of who you are, who you've always been, who you couldn't stop being if you tried. And so it begins with being humbled, with surrendering. That's how you break free from those egoic identity traps, those goals that are just meant to build up the identity. You have to start by realizing that on my own, I can do nothing. And I have to just let go and surrender and trust that there is one who will fill me. And then I break free of those goals into the desire of the soul. And that's where that fire is we were talking about before.
Yeah, beautiful. So when we talk about, breaking free of the goals, getting into the desire, would you say that there's a certain technique that you like to use to be able to do that? Is there something that you're aware of that brings you into that depth? Because I think for our listeners, they all obviously, not obviously, probably want what we're talking about here. So what is it that brings people in? I know for me, it's definitely around, and I talk about this in my book, how to create spaciousness for the sacred in my life.
Yeah.
And it can be something very big or something very, very small that actually brings that into my reality. So I talk about that in the book, but I'd like to hear for you, what is it for you?
Well, I like that word, spaciousness. And I've done something, you mentioned it in the intro, a bit strange, a bit radical,
Yes.
that is meant really just to increase the inner spaciousness while limiting the outer. So, you mentioned this in your introduction, that I've taken vows to be, for 1 year, what's called an anchorite. Now, most people probably don't know what an anchorite is, because it's actually a very ancient tradition that was pretty strong in medieval times, but has been completely extinct for hundreds of years. An anchorite in medieval times would be someone similar to a hermit that would dedicate their life completely to prayer and contemplation. But unlike a hermit, they wouldn't go off into the forest. They would do it right in the middle of the town, usually what would happen is they would have a small enclosure that was built onto a church, and there would be two windows. One would look into the church so they could attend mass, and the other window looked out onto the street so people could come to them for spiritual advice, or to give them the food or whatever they might need. And when someone would become an anchorite or an anchoress, if it was a woman, they would enter in. There would always be a dedication with the bishop. Often they would receive last rites before going in, because once they were in, the door would be bricked up and they would never leave again for the rest of their life. And there are people that we know of, like the most famous anchoress would be Julian of Norwich, which, by the way, on the outer side of my wall here, there's a beautiful painting of Julian that a friend of ours did. And Julian entered her anchor hold when she was in her early 30s and lived there until she was in her 80s. So she was in her anchor hold for over 40 years and just dedicating herself completely to prayer and meditation. So to answer your question, for me, it has to do with devotion. If you want to increase that inner spaciousness, you have to fall in love with love itself. And you have to give yourself to that. That's the reason I'm here for a year, so that I can just completely focus on that, on one thing. I do that sometimes by chanting. I do that often by praying or just meditating, or even more often singing. My biggest challenge, I've been in here for 2 weeks now. My biggest challenge is that I need to limit all the doing and increase the being. For me, doing is expressing myself creatively. So I've been here in my little tiny room here, recording songs. And of course, I still do the daily lessons here at Namaste, but just from inside. But for me, it's about letting go of thinking I need to do anything and just simply being present here, being alone with the great alone. And it's devotional. It's really beautiful. And it's I don't even know what words to use, because it's so big anymore that words don't even quite get there. But I do know that it is about cultivating some practice in all of our lives, whether it be someone like me who's locked himself into a little tiny enclosure for a year, or anyone else, to take time every day to be devotional, just to open up that door to love, to the presence of love, to pray, to sing, to chant, whatever it is that works for you. It's going to be different for everyone, but to find what does work for you and to give yourself to that.
Thank you so much. It's very inspiring for me. You know, when I was in Assisi and I ran into you last year, I often say this in my Facebook lives, that the story of my book came from sitting in these tiny little churches in Assisi that don't have a lot of ornamental, lots of lots of gold and lots of ornate
Right.
things. They're just extremely plain, and I love that. I'm very attracted to that, because I think that the stillness and the sacredness and falling in love with love is it just, to me, aligns with that beautiful simplicity. So I always say to people, you don't need to go to Assisi to feel that, but it is important to have no distractions, no outside things that are just really to have that spaciousness,
Yeah.
both environmentally and inside.
Yeah, I can probably just imagine what chapel you're talking about in Assisi, because my favorite little church or chapel in Assisi is called San Stefano. And it's a tiny little chapel right in the middle of the town. And
Yes.
do you know where I'm talking about?
Yes, that's one of the ones I went to about 3, regularly.
That's
So
one of my favorites. Yeah. I mean, you've got the big basilicas, but it's a place like San Stefano that is so simple and so quiet. And of course, speaking of St. Francis and Assisi, that's what drew him. It was those little tiny chapels that he wanted to rebuild, and and spend all of his time, or Claire, St. Claire, spending her entire life at the Chapel of San Damiano, just in that pure state of devotion. So we can't overemphasize the role and the importance of devotion in
Yes.
this path, because devotion is all about the heart. You're not going to get it here.
Yes.
But if you allow it to sink into the heart, then it gets you. You don't have to get it, it gets you.
Beautiful. I love some of these phrases you're saying. It gets you. You don't have to get it. Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of my mentors, he talked about being introduced to Stuart Wilde, who had this retreat, and he said that there's only one thing you ever need to learn in life, and everybody's thinking, oh my God, this is it, we've come all this way, he's gonna give us something big. And he said, don't lean forward and don't lean back. And I thought, wow, that's so profound, because all our lives we spend either chasing, trying to manipulate our environment to feel better about ourselves, or we are moving back and trying to hide from the world, or trying to, withdraw from society.
Uh,
And so I thought I'd give you an opportunity, because, you're so brilliant in this space, to talk about that. And really, that is also the philosophy of the Tao, isn't it?
oh gosh, yes, absolutely. The focus of any true spiritual path, which is simply be here right now. And that's all Stuart Wilde was saying. Don't lean into the future. Don't worry about what hasn't come, and don't focus on what has already been. Just be here now. Be present. And
Yes.
and this is where forever is. People think that forever is a really long time. Forever is not a really long time. Forever has nothing to do with time. Forever is just right now, and being fully present to the right now. I mean, the idea that we would live for a long time sounds pretty boring to me. But
Hmm.
for me to live right now, to be fully awake and fully alive right now, I think that's what Stuart Wilde was trying to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so simple, and this is also simple. It's not complicated. We often overcomplicate things, but
Yeah.
we don't need to. We can just allow it to be simple. The question is, how do we access that moment right here and right now? Well, it begins, as we said before, with really, really wanting it, the desire to be fully embraced by the moment, by love, and then surrendering and trusting. And there are many tools, but if we can keep them simple and just and not be complicated, just let it bring us into this present moment. Some people like to meditate. For others, that's hard. For maybe for that person, chanting's a better way. But to find the one thing that works for you, that brings you into the present moment, that's what the Tao is, and that's where the truth is.
Yeah.
So why not?
Well, you're a perfect example of that. I remember meeting you in Assisi and thinking, what is it? Something's different about this person. And I walked away from our encounter and I thought, he's just so full of the light of the divine, because you're so present, and every cell of you was there, in that encounter. And that's so rare. But like you said, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I know in my book I spend a whole section talking about presence, because I truly feel, I don't know about you, James, but how can we be change makers in the world? How can we be influential without being present? To me, you can, but it's not a lasting, sustainable, positive influence. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. Well, if we're not present first with ourselves, we can't be present to another person. So it really, back to that whole discussion on identity, it has to do with stripping away all of those other ideas and concepts that we're not, so we can get to the core of who we are, and then be fully present to that. And then being present to others is natural and automatic. I don't have to try. In fact, trying to be present with you or with anyone else, it's never going to happen. But if I just am on fire with love because I've stripped away all of those other blocks to the awareness of love, then being present with everyone in every moment is just a natural byproduct of that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. My last question really is for the people who are very, feel a passion for their career or their profession, or maybe a nonprofit initiative or something, and they're struggling between the beingness, which we talked a lot about today, and the doingness, which you said, the creativity, the whatever it is that you're doing to create your outcome, intended outcome. How do you merge the being and the doing in your life?
Oh man, that is a great question. Spontaneously. uh, I think, that is, I think, the answer. I don't plan ahead. I'm not one of these, like, for example, if I'm writing a book, and thinking 16 books, I've never really known what I was going to write. I just start writing, and I let it unfold. And the same with my life in general. I try not to over plan, because usually when I'm planning, it's just my identity trying to assert itself and what it thinks it wants, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just being really present to what's happening in front of me. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't challenges, like being here in my anchor hold. As I said before, my challenge is to focus more on being than doing. The problem with my doing is that it's so much fun. I just love to do it because it's usually me singing and creating whatever. But I need to take time to just be. And then if a song suddenly erupts, then I run in front of my microphone and begin singing it. But I think it really is about spontaneity, divine spontaneity,
Mm-hmm.
which is really just another way of saying to allow yourself to be guided, to not try and do it on your own. When we're trying to make something happen or motivate something, we're usually trying to do it on our own, and it's never going to bring us the results we want, even when it seems to.
Yeah.
Even when it seems like it works, right around the corner is something else that's going to level you. But when I just am continually surrendering, continually asking for guidance, allowing myself to be shown, to be creative, to be spontaneous, then whatever's around the corner is fine, because I'm going to integrate that and I'm going to use that. Even if what's around the corner is not so fun, that's okay, because that's just part of the integration.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I think everything we've shared here today comes back to being in the moment, being spontaneous, being on fire, and letting all of those things congeal. And then I'll have the greatest influence. St. Francis used to say, our only job is to teach love wherever we go, and only when necessary to use words. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't trying to influence people with his words. He was allowing the presence of the divine to move through him, and to let that be what influences people, presence itself.
Yeah, so powerful, so powerful. And I think too, with people who are heavy into the doing, there's times when we all have to, not all of us, but most of us have to, let's say, work for 12 hours a day, for especially entrepreneurs, right? To get something done for a deadline or whatever it is. Um, but what I write about in my book is really ways to, I call it, do it without drama, James.
Yeah, nice.
And so it's my little mantra now. I think I'm going to get t-shirts done like,
I like that.
hashtag do it without drama. But really, I think when you reach that state where you are cultivating that inner peace and spaciousness and the love of the sacred, there is that more
Yeah.
easefulness in your doing, because you're not so in your mind attached to, oh my goodness, I don't have enough time, I don't have this, I don't have that. And it starts to become a little more easeful. What do you think of that?
Oh gosh, yes. Ease. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Let
Yes.
it be easy, to
Yeah.
let it be even when it's not, okay? And I think that's another key. I like to say, I'm happy even when I'm not. Even when I'm challenged and having to go through stuff, there's a core of happiness within me. And it's the same thing with ease. Even when I'm having to work hard, there can be a core of natural ease where I'm just relaxed within that because I know that everything is fine, everything's going to get done. So, I mean, like you, like everyone else, there are times when we just have to focus and get things done. But there can still be that ease. We don't have to stress over it. We can let it be easy.
Beautiful. Well, everyone, James Twyman, as you can see, full of beautiful insights and ideas. That's why I asked him if he would be willing to write the foreword to the Tao of Influence. And so, James, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about your work?
Well, they can go to the website, which is James F. Twyman, Twyman. We've got all sorts of things there. And you've been to our community here in Mexico, Namaste Lake Chapala. Probably the most satisfying thing that I do every day is help facilitate the morning session that we have, which is just a way for us to fan the flame in each other and to join and to really stretch into that divine. And one of the things that's happened because of the pandemic is we've been broadcasting them on Zoom, and we have them all up on Facebook or on YouTube. So if you were to go to YouTube and just type in Namaste Lake Chapala, a lot of those recordings from the morning will come up. Or just go to the website and you can get on the mailing list and you'll get a link so you can attend live every day. And it's just so, I mean, the challenges that we're facing now are great challenges, but they're shaping a new experience in a new world that if we can once again just ease into it and not worry, but just allow it to be easy, I think in a few months or a year or whatever it is, we're going to find that we've welcomed a whole new world.
Yes, indeed. It is a welcoming of a new world. And I love that you have that perspective because there are people that are, really wrapped up in their worries and personal
Yeah.
concerns. But I think as a global village now and being the opportunity to be much more unified, to care for each other, everything that you and I have been talking about today is foundational to that. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, there are always going to be people who are going to fight every inch of the way, and there will always be people like us who are willing just to, float down the river, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, merrily, merrily. Life is but a dream.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much again, James. And for those of you that are looking to take the next step, the Tao of Influence is available on KarenMcGregor.com, or you can go to Amazon, either one, and find it there. Tao is spelled Tao, the Tao of Influence, based on the beautiful wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you again, James, for your great
So
wisdom.
welcome, Karen. And I'll just put in a final plug for the book. It really is a brilliant offering. I think everyone's going to get so much out of it. And this is the time. This is the time when we need this wisdom.
Thank you so much, James. Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon.